Thank you, Kim. That was an unusually long reading, and so in counterpoint to that, this will hopefully be a fairly short sermon. Kim said most of what I'm going to say in different words. However, I came up with the title first and then the sermon after. So, Hermits, Heroes and Us. Very catchy. So, when we look at solitude, we have heard in the reading that is not such a bad thing. I must confess that when I thought about it, I thought it was something negative. Something depressing and dark. Something that happens when you're locked away in a dark room somewhere. However, now having read and heard the reading from Kim, I realised I was mixing up solitude with loneliness. So I needed a rethink. And as usual, my mind jumped all over the place. Hence the kind of 3 parts to the title. The description of solitude and loneliness came from Psychology Today. So I guess it can be trusted. But firstly, hermits. Fascinating guys. I take it we all know what hermits are. However, even if you do, I'm going to say a little bit about them. Hermits are men or women that live in isolation from society. Your typical hermit, or how we generally see them, is the grubby old man in an old shack or cave or even a hole in the ground who just sits there and every time someone goes by goes, "Bah!" However, the only thing they do have in common amongst hermits is that they avoid all human contact. Do they all live in shacks? No. Do they all live in caves? No. Are they all dirty and grubby? Funnily enough, no. But is that solitude, being a hermit, locking yourself away? Or is it loneliness? Sometimes I think it is both. I think we are by nature quite sociable characters. Yes, we all want some alone time, a bit of me time, a bit of pampering. But we also crave the company of others. According to the reading, solitude restores us both in body and mind. But it makes me think, haven't hermits gone just a little bit too far? I think so. And when I was looking at this, I couldn't help but think of Monty Python's Life of Brian. Fantastic film. The main character, Brian, gets mistaken for being the Messiah. And so he's chased around by a group of people that keep saying, "Follow him, follow the gourd, follow the slipper." And there's a point in the film where he's trying to hide, and he jumps into a hole. And he lands on a hermit's foot. And the hermit goes, "Ah!" And then the hermit turns around and starts having a right go at him. Starts going on saying, "I've been in this hole for 30 years, I've took a vow of silence, I haven't uttered a sound in all that time, and now you jump in without a by your leave." And he goes on and on and on. And he blames Brian for breaking his holy vow. This was his spiritual practice. A vow of silence in a dirt hole in the middle of nowhere. And he blames Brian for ruining it. But apart from being very funny, it seems to me that the hermit had it quite easy, in a way. It's very easy to have a vow of silence if you're in a hole in the middle of nowhere with no one to talk to. It's not a very big stretch. And to be holy, to do no wrongdoing, again, it doesn't seem that difficult. For after all, if you've got no temptations and no challenges, if every day is the same, there's just you, your dirt hole, and actually he had a bush as well, full of berries. That's another part of the film which, if you want to see it, watch it, it's brilliant. So being holy seems a doddle as well, really. There's no changes. And there's no one to do wrong to. There's only him and his bush. So, no wrongdoing. So is that a way to do solitude as a spiritual practice? I don't think so. Plus, I think after a while you probably go mad as a box of badgers. It seems to me that this is more like isolation rather than solitude. So it seems that the people we may see as the very epitome of solitude, the hermit, the spiritual hermit, may actually have got it completely wrong. And they could actually be the very worst at solitude. I guess you could be saying, but hermits don't exist anymore. It's all in the past, it's all history, it's all films and books. But actually a recent report suggests there are over 200 hermits in the UK today. 200 hermits. And these are people that identify as hermits, spiritual hermits, where they're not just people who can't be bothered to get out of the house or get out of bed. These are people who have actually chosen that lifestyle. And they even have a prayer network. However, it's all done by Royal Mail. Seriously, no, it is seriously done by Royal Mail. Because they don't have phones. They don't use phones because they want no contact with society. However, the funny thing is they write to each other with prayers. Seems odd to me. And I guess it seems odd to most of us in this 24-hour, 7-day-a-week contact age where, you've got a phone in your pocket and you can access the internet and talk to your granny in Australia. But that is their choice, and that is what they've chosen to live like. So how about the heroes? Have the heroes got it right? Now here I'm thinking more about the heroes of old, knights and all this lot, the Templars, the Crusaders, all the great stories and films that you see from Hollywood. Now they went out boldly to face any challenges, injury, death, sickness, all to spread the word of God, to bring people to Christianity, whatever it took, even if that meant slaughtering half of them, invading their countries and taking everything they owned. But they were fine because it was blessed by the Pope. The Pope actually charged these people with creating these countries, taking them over to Christianity and regaining control of Jerusalem. Because the Pope wanted to be able to walk into Jerusalem and have a nice holiday, I expect, I don't know. But all of these guys were Christians. And anything they did, the Pope forgave their sins. Doesn't matter what they did. So, people being people in those days, what you had was a bunch of sort of middle-class people, I would say, leading a group of poorer people to go through countries, supposedly on a holy pilgrimage to bring people to Christianity. So what did they do? Well, funny enough, as lots of big armies did, they pillaged everything in sight, really, stole as much as they could, took as much property as they could, and although being charged with returning certain countries to certain organisations or groups, they of course didn't. They just built themselves nice houses. But these were all Christians, and they were blessed by the Pope. So it must be okay, surely. Now, what's that got to do with solitude? Yeah, see, I can see a few puzzled faces, so it's all right, I'm going to go on to that. Now, the leaders of these groups, they were kind of feudal in makeup. So you had a guy who had a bit of money, and he would take along a load of servants who would be part of his force, and then they'd add to it as they went along. Now, the guys at the top, because they are being blessed by the Pope, would, before they went off onto any battle or campaign or march into another town, have a period of vigil where they would go off in solitude, not necessarily in a temple, but just somewhere quiet, maybe in a tent, and pray all night. And you think, oh, well, that's great. Surely that's good. That's spiritual. That's holy. That's talking to God. However, generally what they prayed for was to be strong and victorious, to enable them to do their holy work, to be able to kill more people than the person in the next group. So then it becomes slightly less holy. And so they would use solitude as a chance to build their courage, to get themselves ready for the following day so they can walk out and go, I have spoken to God and today we will be victorious. But on the other hand, perhaps they were just fooling themselves, trying to convince themselves that actually what they were doing was right. After all, the Pope said it's okay, so it must be right. So, have the heroes got it right? Is that how you do spiritual solitude? I don't think so. I don't think that focusing your mind on a single task, particularly when that single task involves burning down entire towns, massacring half a dozen people, and robbing places, I find it hard to equate that to any sort of spiritual practice. It seems to me more of a period of self-delusion, so that when you do go out and do these things, you can look back at it and say, oh yes, but that's what God called me to do. It's not my fault. And it allows you to go off and do whatever you like under the name of religion, to impose your order on the world around you. Sounds a bit familiar. So finally, and see, I said it was a bit short sermon. So finally we come to us. Now, the us here, I have to say, is not us. I'll say that right off. It's just a nice title. It's me. So I'm going to talk about myself. The reading we had this evening, as I said, comes from Psychiatry Today and gives some great and positive things that can come from solitude. I'll just remind you of a couple which I particularly liked. Solitude is a time that can be used for reflection, inner searching or growth. Nothing wrong with that. And the one I really like, this is the best one of the whole reading, is solitude suggests peacefulness stemming from a state of inner richness. Solitude suggests peacefulness stemming from a state of inner richness. Now, I love that phrase. And to me, that inner richness is where God is in my life, in every part of my life. So to me, solitude isn't a time of hiding from challenges or life like the hermits. It isn't a time for building up your ego or convincing yourself that you're better than you are, like the heroes. To me, solitude is a time of peace, a time to open myself to God, a time of spiritual searching or growth, a time to refill the well of inner richness, which many of us would probably identify as being the Spirit. A time not to prepare to impose my will on the world around me, but to prepare to do God's will in the world. But most of all, to me, solitude is my time with God, and a time of just being. Just being. That's incredible. That, to me, is the true spiritual practice of solitude.